In death, there are no accidents. It's all part of death's sadistic design. Nailed it. Hello, horror fans. That is me impersonating Tony Todd from the movie I'm going to review today, which is Final Destination, the first of the franchise, from all the way back in 2000. So, 20 years old now, hard to believe. I remember those days pretty well, seeing the original movie. I think I went to see it at the cinema, and then I've seen it a few times since as well. So, had it on VHS at one point. That sort of shows you what sort of time that was. But yeah, happy October. Happy October 2020, guys, horror fans. So I'm continuing my month-long marathon of horror movies, and I'm diving into a new franchise for me to do all the way through. And this is obviously the first of that franchise. I think it's an interesting one to look at, the Final Destination movies, because I think they stand out as being very much movies of their time, and I guess it's weird to say that of a movie which is only 20 years old, because I guess in general terms that's not really that long ago, but I think just some of the style and the characters, the Final Destination movies do feel of their time, and it's probably another franchise which really benefited from the success of a movie like Scream. So it possibly couldn't have happened without the Scream movies being so popular. But it's also quite a cool little concept. That sort of high concept, I think, which you can really play with and have a bit of fun. So, but what's going to be interesting for me is that I've only seen the first movie before. I'd seen that before. I'd now seen it a few different times, but I've not seen any of the sequels. So I think that's going to be interesting for me to work my way through them and to see which is the best. I've heard different things. I've heard the second one's meant to be quite good, for example, but then some of the later ones not so much. So we'll see. I think I might even rank them at the end, because I'm going to be intrigued to see which one I like the most. But I better get into talking about the film now. I will say the movie's directed by James Wong, which sort of is relatable to stuff I'm doing on the channel at the moment, because James Wong was involved in the X-Files, of course, the original X-Files. He wrote a lot of the episodes, tend to work in partnership with James Morgan a lot on the X-Files. And James Morgan's also involved in the Final Destination franchise, so they're a bit of a team. They've come over together. So James Wong directs this, so he's sort of a director of note. And I mention him and the X-Files because, of course, I've been reviewing the X-Files on the channel. I should be up to about episode 10 by the time this video goes out. Maybe even 11, at least episode 10. So you should have 10 X-Files episodes out to watch those reviews. But so James Morgan, oh, not James Morgan, I'm getting the names muddled up. It was Glenn Morgan. James Wong directs this Final Destination movie. And in case you don't know about the setup, you've never seen the movie, or you don't really know anything about this franchise, the setup then we have. So at the start of this movie, a group of teenagers are going on a school trip to Paris. They're getting the aeroplane, and you have this one particular character, Alex, a pretty typical teenage boy. He has, when they first board the flight, he has premonitions of a disaster happening when the plane basically, blows up in midair and people fly out of the plane. So it's basically that it's going to crash and they're all going to die. He has that vision before they take off, so he starts freaking out. And this isn't a plot spoiler, this is like the start of the movie, really. He starts freaking out. He gets thrown off the plane along with a couple of other kids, one of them his best friend. There's also like this kind of sort of jerky jock bully who Alex gets into a fight with, so he also gets thrown off the plane. And there's like a couple of teachers as well, and there's this girl played by Ali Letta, Claire, although weirdly it's spelled Clear, so that must be a weird American phrase. Now, she doesn't get thrown off the plane, but she, because of Alex's warning about what is about to happen, she like almost instinctively gets off the plane as well, just to be on the safe side. And obviously there's reasons later for why she's willing to go along with Alex and his prediction. And of course the prediction comes true because they're off the plane, and once it takes off, the plane does indeed explode with all their classmates and all the people inside. And from that moment onwards, it's revealed that, or Alex starts having these premonitions regularly, and the whole concept of the movie is that by interfering with Death's plan, he has thwarted Death. He and the group of friends and the teacher who got off the plane have basically thwarted Death's plan. So the setup of the movie is that throughout the film, Death is trying to catch up with them and trying to eliminate them one by one. And Alex kind of has this intuition, so we get a group dynamic and Alex warning everyone basically, and ultimately throughout the film he tries to figure out who's going to be next and how to stop it. And you also get a plot where the FBI are interested in Alex, and what sort of happens is that because he's at like crime scenes of people who've just been killed, it sort of puts him in the frame as the potential killer, and so the FBI take an interest and start tracking him. So that's the setup basically, and I think it's the sort of premise which can sound a bit cheesy, can sound a bit silly, Death trying to catch up with you, obviously flaunting Death's plan, all that kind of stuff. But it is actually, when you put it on paper and then watch it in the film itself, I think it is a cool premise. It's a fun premise. It's obviously not the sort of premise you can take too seriously. I think you have to treat this as kind of a light-hearted popcorn sort of horror thriller, I guess, with obviously you've got this group of characters as well who you're meant to, I think especially with Alex and also who did us? Oh, Clear, the Ali Letta character. I think those two characters in particular, I think you're meant to invest with and care about. The other characters are largely sort of fodder. I don't think there's a lot of character growth with them. Obviously, certain characters like the jock, his character. I think he's in it a fair amount, but I'm not sure you're ever really supposed to care about him. So it's a fun premise, and I like this first Final Destination movie a fair bit actually. I think it does run with the premise. There's some entertaining and effective death scenes. I think those scenes stand out as some of the best of the movie. I think there is some good drama, some good character drama, and it's a well directed, well paced little movie. I think it definitely works on the level of being that fun sort of Friday night blockbuster with some good like thrills and spills, but with quite a cool concept anyway, and a good sort of premise that it plays with throughout the film a bit, particularly at the end. It's not perfect. I think the characters maybe aren't that amazing. I think you do come to a film like this more for the kills, more for kind of the premise and the tension a little bit, but the characters I think are a little bit surface level. Some of the acting's okay. I think some performances are better than others. I know at this time, Ali Letter, I think she was really being pushed as like the next big star, and she kind of did have this sort of like kind of oddball indie girl kind of thing down pretty well, and she appeared in a few big movies around this time, but ultimately she never became that sort of that breakout star. I think you've got Devon Surrey as Alex. He's alright. He's a little bit one note, but I think he's fine. I think it's a case of him being like realistic casting. You sort of believe in him as this typical teenage boy, and some of the stuff he goes through. I guess he has like a typical, quite attractive but quite sensitive, almost like Dawson's Creek sort of syndrome, that kind of vibe about him. But he's quite well cast, and I think Alex is quite likable. I think you do want to root to him. And there's this sort of subplot where Claire, I'm gonna have to say Claire. They say Claire in the film, for some reason it's spelled clear, but I guess I can say Claire. It just sounds a bit weird to me. But she's sort of drawn to Alex, and the reason is because of something that happened in her past with her father, and she has a particular interest with things of a macabre sort of supernatural type nature. So they sort of set that up quite early with like some of the magazines she's reading, because there's this weird sort of shot where she's like reading an article on, and it's on the crash and the death of Princess Diana. So that's clearly setting her up and some of her character traits. But her and Alex, I think they do have quite a nice little bond, and those characters and their relationship sort of works quite well for me. I think some of the other characters are a little too one note, a little bit too throwaway. So you have Sean William Scott, who American Pie, isn't he? He's known for those movies. He's obviously in things like Without a Paddle. He's always playing like the typical sort of nerdy, sort of clueless sort of dork. And that's exactly who he plays in this. He becomes one of the ones who is like gets off the plane or is forced off the plane. So he survives. So again, it's a case of Death trying at some point trying to catch up with him. He does actually have some funny lines, the character, because at one point, when he finds out that it's probably going to be his time to die, is something like, "Hey, I knew I should have felt tapping up in the pool that time." And there's another line before that when he's saying, am I gonna live to see like the I can't remember whatever sports team it is. It's like I don't know, like the Falcon or the Jets. Am I gonna live to see the Jets win the World Series or whatever sport it is? I'm not sure what sport he was referencing, but couple of good lines like that. But apart from that, he's a pretty disposable character. Yeah, you have, as I said, the Jock character, who's for most of the film is kind of like really shitty to Alex. And even when he figures out what's going on and he accepts, then hey, supernatural stuff is going down. He's still not the most likable, and I think they play with that a little bit at the end, even though him and Alex sort of come around and they're kind of hanging out at the end. I think, yeah, they're still playing with that sort of jerky character type trope at the end, and I think that plays into like the sort of like cliffhanger ending, if you like, or the way the film ends. Um, but yeah, you have a group of characters. You also have his girlfriend. I forget what's that character's name. I forget now. But yeah, you have his girlfriend who like gets off the plane with him, and she has a small role. She doesn't really last too long, and she's okay actually. Like I think it would have been easy to have made her this shallow sort of character who's like superficial and just kind of is like mean as well, but they didn't actually. She comes across as alright, as quite likable, but she only has a small role. And then you have the teacher who kind of starts freaking out around Alex because of his like just the fact that obviously he made this prediction and it came true. It really throws her life into turmoil, and she basically decides she can't teach in the town anymore and has to leave. Um, and there's one good touch with her character, which is in the opening of the film, which is when she tells, because when like the fracas kicks off and they're all flown sort of thrown off the plane. I said flown, didn't I? Freudian slip. When they're chucked off the plane, basically, they're told by the flight attendant or whoever it's meant to be that they can only have one like teacher on the plane, one adult now. I don't know where they come up with these rules, but I think whatever, for whatever reason. And the teacher says, like, as in the main teacher says, because the other guy, like, speaks French, so that's obviously why they've got him on the trip. She said, yeah, it's probably better if you go, I think, because obviously he's a French speaker. And she says, we'll catch up, or I'll catch up, I said. I mean, at this point, they're sort of thinking that Alex won't be allowed back on the plane. But she says, I'll catch up, I'll get the next flight out. And so that's quite a good little detail, the fact that she obviously makes that decision and says, no, it's fine, you go. And then she lives to regret it because obviously the plane goes up. And so that little touch is good. I think that's almost like a very human type thing where you say, no, it's fine, you go ahead, I'll follow and stuff. And you don't even think about it, and then it does come back to haunt you. Just those little moments like that. Now, obviously, you've got a supernatural premise here, but in general, I think there are moments like that in life when you make a decision of like that on the spur of the moment, and you then look back on it and regret it, even though she had no way of knowing what was going to happen, apart from the fact that Alex warned you. But hey. So I'm going to get into the movie now. I think it is a movie that looks very much of its time. If you watch the opening credits, for example, it has a very like early 2000s look to them. There's a lot of like flashing about, a lot of like kind of just highlighting of like certain like words and lettering. It almost has like an early like noughties like thriller sort of feel to it, where it just feels very dramatic and kind of hyper. And the music as well, I think, is very like late 90s, early noughties, and just the opening. I mean, almost the fact that there are opening titles, because I guess nowadays the trend has become that you get the end credits, but then most movies, I think nowadays, just tend to go in straight into the film, and you don't normally get opening credits. But yeah, the look of it, the titles feel very much of the time. There's also this thing where it's definitely following on and copying a bit the Scream thing, a lot of smart light references. Not quite in the same way, but you have a similar feel where it's like referring back to like older movies or stuff like that. So actually, I can't remember all the names, but I did read on the trivia that every sort of person in this film, like the main characters anyway, their names all come from something relating to horror or something like that. So, for example, the Sean William Scott character, his last name is Hitchcock, so obviously referring to Alfred Hitchcock. And one of them, the surname's the from the silent movie director, the guy who did the original Dracula. So all sorts, so stuff like that I quite enjoy, some smart like references like that. And I think the setup to the movie is really, really good, really effective. I think you get that sense of anticipation when you see Alex at the start, like going on a big trip, and the sort of build up to it where you see like the characters, and there's just an energy, that energy of going on a big trip, traveling somewhere like to Europe for the first time, which I'm guessing is the idea that these characters are. And it just feels like a classic school trip where it's an experience, because you're not used to like sort of going on a trip or going on holiday with these characters. So you have this kind of oddball sort of collection of characters, and just the squabbling and stuff and the teasing, it's sort of very relatable. But I think the way they set up the whole premise of the film, and then following like the plane exploding, the way the characters react and the drama that comes out of it, I think it's all very well done, and it's a great way to hook you into the film. There's some like clever moments of black humor, like one of the characters when they get on the plane, and it gets across that they're all kind of nervous about flying. So he's like, yeah, because he sees something, and he says, oh, because he sees a baby or something, like a very young baby, and says, yeah, don't worry, that's a good sign. It would be a really like fucked up god to do anything to us. And then he kind of sees like a handicapped kid on the plane, and he's like, yeah, a real fucked up god sort of thing. But yeah, there's little details which then they come back to later on in the film on the plane, like when Alex is asked to swap seats by these two girls because they want to sit together, and they've sort of tried to like get the other guy, Alex's best friend, to like swap seats, and he kind of like comes up with an excuse, and it's part of his sort of plan because he likes them, basically. He wants to get near to them, but yeah, Alex being the good guy, being the kind of, yeah, the gentleman, he says, yeah, no problem. But then they return to that later, and that's like actually part of Alex's like vision when he sees what's going to happen to the plane and the passengers, and that whole thing is really well done. And I do love the fact then the way it's played so naturally. You don't know when you watch it first time, then it's actually part of Alex's vision. You know, you're kind of sucked into the world of the film, so you probably think, "Oh my God, what's happening? This is it, we're only 10 minutes into this thing, and this stuff is already going down." And then the actual you cut to the real time, and that's when Alex freaks out and tries to get everyone off the plane. So, but the detail of the girls move asking him if he can swap seats, that's something that comes back into play later, because later, quite late in the film, Alex realizes then the fact that they swap seats, that changed the order of thing, and he figures out then death essentially, then there's an order to the death based on the seating pattern. Now obviously I guess in the plane, I don't know, you would think they're all going to die at pretty much the same time, but I think what he's saying is now that you've got like these survivors, then they're going to be targeted in order, sort of thing, of where they were sitting, or something like that. But certainly the fact that they switch seats, that being Alex and the girls, I think that changes things. So out of the survivors, they're being targeted in order of where they were sitting on the plane. So that does change things. So that's a really cool detail, and that's what I mean about them like playing with the format as they go along and certain twists and turns. But the whole setup and the Fallout from it is like really well done. And I'll get into some of the deaths in a bit, because there's probably not that much to talk about without going to the death. Obviously, you've got the Tony Todd cameo, which is absolutely brilliant. I loved his cameo because I think Tony Todd's one of those actors. He, post Candyman, which is obviously his most famous role, he tends to get, kind of typecast in like horror movies, and sometimes he's just there because he's Tony Todd and he doesn't always get the best part. But this is quite a cool cameo. He plays like a mortician who kind of like warns Alex at one point, and clears in the scene as well. And he has that great speech which I opened the video with. Is as I said, he's basically telling them, in death there are no accidents. And then he's like, I can't do the voice, damn it, but it's like, it's all part of death's sadistic design. It's absolutely brilliant. The delivery, he really gives it some oomph. And obviously it's kind of ridiculous because he's like this mortician and he seems to be like trying to spook these kids, but it's a horror convention, and it works really well. And it's almost like he's warning them, but at the same time, he is scary in himself. So I do love that cameo. That's a great scene. I think it's a good example of how to really steal a scene. That appearance by Tony Todd. And I think there are some surprises in this film. I think it kind of subverts your expectations at time, which again is a very like 2000s thing to do. But one example of that is that they actually kill off the best friend quite early. He originally survives. He leaves the plane with Alex and the rest, but he is the next one killed. He's killed in his home, in his bathroom, and it's made to look like suicide. And the the parents, like his parents, kind of say to Alex, don't you see, he felt so guilty about surviving and what have you, and like your prediction, and he just committed suicide because it's made to look like it is suicide. It's a pretty cool death. I think some of the deaths feel a little bit like a gimmick. So, for example, on this one, you've got like the water on like the bathroom floor, which is like moving and edging ever closer. But you understand what they're doing, and it's teasing that he's gonna slip on it, and eventually he does, and he ends up in like the shower bit and with the thing wrapped around his neck, and he's being choked out. So it's basically made to look like a suicide. And Alex doesn't buy this because he's spoken to him like not too long ago, and they're going through a period where like the parents are keeping them apart after what happened. But his friend, I forget the name, but he does say, yeah, once all this craziness is over, we should meet up and hang out and stuff. So Alex becomes convinced that, hey, he wouldn't say that if he was about to kill himself. But as I said, the kills are pretty good. I think they work quite well and are effective. There's actually a really bloody kill, which is the teacher, and it's like literally before she's about to leave home. Or leave town, and she actually plays like the John Denver song on the record, and that's cool because that comes into play later on. That's used for the ending. Actually, it's not the record at the end, but when the survivors, let's say, go to Paris, that being Alex, the bully character, and Claire, they decide to go to Paris at the end to sort of mark the fact that they didn't originally. Then there's like a street performer who's actually playing the song, which plays on the record. So that's a clever touch. But anyway, yeah, the teacher's death is pretty brutal because there's all these things going on where the stove lights fire, and she tries to stop it, and then knives start coming at her, and this is when the suspicion really starts to point towards Alex, and he shows up on the scene because he has these premonitions, and he tries to save her, but her death is like really brutal. Because I thought she was a little harsh on Alex, like the way she was treating him. You can understand her being spooked out, but even so, as a teacher, you thought she might be a bit more sensitive. But anyway, her death is pretty well done. And Billy's death I do like, and I think there's something about Billy's death which is basically saying, hey, he's this goofy character, he's very annoying, because he is annoying despite having those couple of good lines. So I think there is something quite satisfying about getting him out of the way, because he's a pretty disposable character. Carter, that's the name of the bully. I've just seen it in my notes. But yeah, Billy's death, what they do is there's this whole thing where Alex seems to think that Carter's the next in line, and so Carter kind of does almost like this, oh well, if I'm next I don't care, screw it sort of thing. that kind of movie sort of cliche where he starts driving the car really fast and it's like, screw it if I'm gonna go anyway. And he ends up on the train track, and it becomes this kind of a bit melodramatic scene where he's like just waiting for the train, and they're like shouting at him, "Don't be a dick," all this, get out. And like fate and what have you starts getting in the way. It starts like stopping them from getting out. And Alex actually saves Carter, and that kind of changes the order of things again. So I do like the way they play with that stuff in the film, and that's where the twist comes in, because he saved Carter. It then skips to Billy, and Billy's being a real dick as well, because he's almost he might as well be laughing at Carter, where he's like getting his face. So, I told you, you're next. And of course, Billy's next because of it skips to him after Carter. And so what happens is the train comes past, and it propels like this metal plate into Billy's. I think it's like his throat, and kills him. I think it chops his head. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it might chop his head off. Or certainly it goes into his throat. But it's a really cool kill, actually. And Billy was really getting on my nerves, so I'm pleased he got eliminated. And then it kind of builds to the end where Clear says to Alex, "Well, it's after you. You're going to be next potentially. So why don't you go to my father's cabin, or my family cabin?" And she suggests that also because the FBI are like closing in and trying to get him, because they're convinced that that he has something to do with it. I think there's some doubt over his involvement and whether he actually killed these people, because they sort of suspect that there's something strange going on. But you get this whole set piece at the end where Alex actually figures out that the orders switch, so then it's actually clear now who's in danger. And there's this whole stuff with like electricity, because there's like a storm and like the power lines coming at her. And yeah, Alex arrives on the scene and sort of saves her, but then he's almost killed as well. And I think that's what obviously like kind of clears him in a way, puts him in the clear, because the FBI must have seen that he was practically almost killed trying to save her. So yeah, I think they're like, okay, yeah, maybe he didn't kill anyone after all. And then we get the end sort of scene in Paris, and Carter kind of can't help himself. He's still being a dick in that scene as well. And he's kind of, because Alex is still getting very superstitious, and him and Clear are together at this point, but he still can't let the past go. He's still like asking questions about the order of thing and what we've seen in the film. And Carter's, I think, as a way to wind him up, Carter just gets a little bit cocky and is kind of saying, "Well, I'm safe because it skipped me, so I've got nothing to worry about. I'm all in the clear. And it's you, Alex. You're the one who's gonna be." Now, to be fair to Carter in this scene, he's clearly joking, and I would kind of be the same maybe, just because Alex is kind of taking things a little too seriously and should just let this stuff drop. But yeah, I think again Carter sort of being Carter. So I think it sets him up to be killed at the end, because there's this thing with like a sign coming loose, one of those like electric signs, and it swings down, and I can't remember exactly what happens. It sort of makes you look like it's going to be Alex, but then I can't remember if Carter gets in his way or not, and that's when it takes out Carter. But it cuts to the credits then. I don't think Alex is in the next film, so I don't know if they're going to write in something where he's killed as well. But it's sort of a cliffhanger ending anyway, where Carter basically gets taken out, and it's hinting at, and this thing will continue. So that's pretty much the film, Final Destination, the first one. Pretty good time. I enjoy watching it. It's a good little watch because it's not too long neither, and I for one I do have nostalgia for this sort of era, and I enjoy this film. It's a fun watch. It's not perfect. There are one or two problems, but overall pretty entertaining Friday night popcorn fare. So I'm gonna give it 7 out of 10. Overall pretty strong. So that's Final Destination, and I will return very soon with my review of the second movie. You can expect that coming up in October as well, and possibly coming up soon a live stream of Final Destination 3. So you can expect Final Destination 2 review also in October, and then a live stream of the third film not too long after that. But let me know what you think of this film in the comments below. Are you a fan or you're not so keen on it? Be interesting to see which Final Destination movie you like the most. Like and subscribe if you are new to the channel, and look out for more horror movie reviews in the next few weeks. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.